Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over the snowstorm in parts of the Northwest. We'll be giving you my updated snowfall forecast at the middle part of today's video. Towards the beginning we'll be timing out the rainfall and snowfall. We'll be going over when all of that is expected to happen, and then towards the end we'll start talking about the temperatures and also the upper air pattern that is allowing this system to occur. So we're going to be going over a lot of that and more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Let's start off with your weather photo of the day. We had one sent in by Francesca from Central Indiana. She sent in a picture of the leaves kind of changing color over some parts of that area. So not the entire area. You can see, for example, on that right-hand side where you have the fully green tree right on top of more of a reddish or orangish tree. And I think one of the reasons that's happening is because, of course, you have that green tree on top that's blocking any rainfall that would be falling onto there from getting to the roots of the tree down here. So you're not really dealing with that much rain getting to the surface of that tree where you would need it to allow the greener colors. So I think one of the things that's blocking some of that color from these smaller trees is just the fact that it's getting blocked out from other leaves on top of it. It could also be because of some drier weather, or also maybe just the proximity to a lake, or if there's any local elevation that could cause some issues. There isn't much elevation difference in central Indiana, so I don't think that's the issue, but it could be lake. It could be the proximity to a lake. That usually lakes are somewhere closer to 1 or 2 weeks ahead of the rest of that area in terms of fall foliage. For example, there's a lake near me, and every single year the fall foliage starts in late September. Meanwhile, the rest of the area is usually in early October, where you start to see the first yellows start to pop up onto the trees. So it's maybe due to that, maybe due to elevation. And I think one of the bigger things that it probably is due to is a lack of rainfall over some of these trees. Now, this tree on top, for example, probably getting an abundant amount of rainfall, but it may be blocking smaller trees like this from getting some of that rainfall. So that may be one of the reasons. If you have a weather photo that you want to send in, send it to that email address on the bottom of the screen or in the bottom of the description as well, and I'll probably feature you in here. You're looking at the precipitation anomalies for Indiana over the past couple of weeks. So this is the 60-day anomalies for the past 2 months, and you're looking at a good portion of central Indiana, with a few exceptions, of course, in eastern Indiana where you have a few pockets. But for the majority of central Indiana, right here, you have some rather below normal amounts of rainfall. You're about 2 or 3 inches below average, and that might be one of the reasons. When it is dry outside, it's harder to keep those leaves green, and therefore they're probably going to turn a little bit orange or yellow until you get another big rain event. So the lack of a big rain event in Indiana and some of the surrounding areas as well may be one of the reasons why you're dealing with that fall foliage. So, or not really fall foliage, but just change in the colors. So thank you for sending that in. If you have any other weather photos of the day that you guys want to send in, again, go to the email address in the bottom of the description, and you can send it in there, and I'll probably put it into into the next video. So whenever you send it in, the next video you'll probably be featured in there. And I think it's really going to be useful when we have snowstorms and things like that. So if you live in an area that was, for example, affected by that snowstorm, just send in those pictures, and I'll put you into the video. I'll put your pictures into the video, of course, if you want the pictures in the video. And I think it'll be a cool feature that we can have occasionally on the channel. So getting into the actual video, looking at the current National Weather Service page, you can see that we have some red flag warnings for fire danger in parts of the Northwest and the Northern Rockies. We have some frost advisories in northeastern Minnesota, and then we have a few flood watches up into a little bit of the northwest, as well as still for parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. Other than that, we have a few wind advisories up for the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, but we don't have many other watches or warnings beside those. Looking at the high temperature from yesterday, it was at 109 degrees in Occotello Wells, California, and again, they got up to 109 degrees. In Montana, in Chote, Montana, they got down to 11 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's in a little bit of an elevation area. So 35 miles west southwest of there, they got down to 11 degrees. And again, if you look at any map, that would be in a highly elevated area. So that's why it's getting that cold. But we were looking at this number. If you were looking at the videos back in July, and the national low temperature was down into the 30s for most days, and even some days it was up into the 40s. So the fact that we're now getting back down into the teens, and I would assume soon the single digits, and eventually the below zero digits, is probably a sign that we're going a little bit closer to winter. Let's start timing out this system. Here to be the simulated radar from the European model, and we're going to look at this from Saturday to about Tuesday, and this is going to be when that storm is going to be taking place. You can see that starting on Saturday, we have some of that rainfall pushing into the Pacific Northwest. Maybe for some of the highest elevations and some of those mountain passes, you might be dealing with a little bit of snowfall, and it would be heavy snowfall at that point. But again, it's going to be for those highest peaks. You're looking at very, very, very high up in elevation, probably over 10,000 feet in a lot of those spots. And if you're up into British Columbia, you don't have to be as high in elevation. You can see it's a little bit more widespread into the Cascades of British Columbia. But especially down in Washington and Oregon, definitely going to need to get high up in elevation to see that snowfall. So for the majority of you guys, pretty much all of you guys in the Northwest, it's going to be a rainstorm. That's going to kind of push out a little bit as we get into Saturday evening. So still raining, but not to the same extent. And we're going to start to see now kind of a cooler push of air. And this colder boundary zone is going to allow some of that snowfall to develop. So all of this is going to continue to head on to the east. And eventually this trough will be digging down into Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, these type of areas where you are going to be dealing with that snowfall. And again, we're going to have your snowfall forecast in just a few minutes. Looking at for Sunday morning, you can see that we have for central Idaho, again, maybe some of the very highest peaks in Oregon as well, dealing with some of that snowfall. If we're looking at a target zone for high snowfall amounts, we're looking at 6+ inches most likely in central Idaho as well as northwestern Wyoming. So these areas are the two spots I would pick out for high amounts of snow. You're also looking at some of these areas in north central Wyoming and some of the higher elevations dealing with quite a bit of snowfall as well. So there's a few spots where if you want to go skiing, you could definitely catch some nice fresh powder. It's not going to be a ton, probably just 6 to 10 inches of snow, but it will definitely be something nice considering that the past couple months we haven't had any snow, of course, because we were in the summer. If we move this on to Sunday in the later morning and early afternoon, you're looking at some of that snowfall now starting to be a little bit more widespread. What we're dealing with is in the high elevations, the snowfall, and then the valleys indicated by the pink colors is where we're dealing with the mixed precipitation. You can kind of see that in between two pockets of snowfall or two high elevation areas, you have that kind of dip in elevation, maybe by 1,000 feet or so, and then that's where you're dealing with the ice or the wintry mix. So the valley spots are going to be where you're dealing with most of the mixed precipitation. Higher in elevation, you're going to be dealing with more of the steady, consistent snowfall. It gets more widespread into northwestern Wyoming, one of the highest elevation areas of the entire lower 48, where you have some mountain peaks going up near 14,000 feet or higher. So very, very high up in elevation here. And we're dealing with some of these snowfall totals probably getting up above 6 inches. We have heavy snowfall through Sunday night into northwestern Wyoming, not as strong into Idaho and western Montana by this point. If we move this on, you can see it does weaken. It doesn't have as much strength to it as we get into late Sunday into Monday morning. If we move this on, moving on to the Midwest perspective, you can see we still have some of that snow up into Colorado and into Wyoming. Again, high elevation snowfall. So if you're looking at this, and let's say you live in Denver, you're probably going to be on the rainy side of things, and probably not dealing with anything in the form of snowfall. You're going to definitely have to get up there in elevation to get some of the snowfall. So even a place like Jackson, Wyoming, where you're up into northwestern Wyoming by that point, you're fairly high up in elevation, especially compared to the rest of the country. But still, that area you probably will still see a little bit of snowfall, but you're probably going to see that mixed in with some rainfall as well. So it's not going to be a steady snowfall, even in those lower lying areas in northwestern Wyoming. It will still be kind of a mixed precipitation event. Again, it's going to be the high elevations that get the majority of the snowfall out of these types of events. One thing that we do want to notice is that in parts of the Dakotas and Montana, we are going to have some severe weather into Monday, maybe lingering into Tuesday early morning hours. So you do want to pay attention to that. It'll either be heavy rainfall or maybe a little bit of lightning and thunder. We're not expecting anything crazy at this point, so nothing like a tornado outbreak is expected right now. But you might just want to keep your eye on some of that rainfall. And behind that, for those of you who are farmers in this area, you want to watch out for some cooler temperatures, and that would extend pretty much for the entirety of eastern Montana, western South Dakota, and North Dakota, and then maybe going up into parts of Minnesota as well. So potentially northern Minnesota, where it's a little bit more forested, northwestern North Dakota as well. You want to pay attention to that for probably Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame with the cooler temperatures, and those colder temperatures will eventually make its way all the way through the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. So even if those of you who live east of there, you still need to pay attention to this, because you will probably be dealing with some temperatures at least getting down into the 40s, and who knows, maybe some areas getting down into the 30s as well. Moving this on, you can see some of that snowfall still up into some of the higher elevations of northwestern and northern Wyoming, as well as northern Colorado, where you're still dealing with a little bit of snowfall lingering on there, but for the majority of that, it's pretty much all said and done with. If we look at the total rainfall for this event through Tuesday night, you can see that especially across the Pacific Northwest coast, we're dealing with a ton of rain. We're looking at 1 to about 5 inches of rainfall. 5 inches in, of course, the highly elevated spots. So if we were looking at up and down the I-5 corridor, you're probably looking at about 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. And then inland of there, so for parts of eastern Oregon and Washington, not as much rainfall, probably up to half an inch in most spots. Of course, locally higher amounts. If we look at the snowfall totals, and we're going to look at the European, the GFS, and the ICON model, so 3 different models that each have a slightly different spin on what may happen. Starting off with the European model, and it hasn't been consistent, but it has been. Let me say this: it has been somewhat consistent, but it hasn't been that great in terms of consistency. We have seen that on some select model runs, it has shifted back and forth. For example, the 12Z model run yesterday. Actually the 0Z, the 12Z model run from yesterday was not that accurate whatsoever. It was showing quite a bit of snowfall into even the lower lying areas of southeastern Wyoming and north central Colorado. And that turns out that it's probably not going to happen. So I already saw some local Denver and local southern Wyoming papers and news outlets saying 21 inches of snowfall for X, Y, and Z area. And of course, that is not going to happen. They're citing one model run out of hundreds of model runs, and they're picking that out to kind of clickbait everybody into thinking that there's going to be 20 inches of snowfall into a lower lying, heavily populated area, which is not going to happen at all. So it's going to be high in elevation in the ski resorts, again in the mountainous areas that are getting maybe 6 to 10 inches of snowfall, nowhere close to 21 inches of snowfall or 20 inches or whatever that number was that I saw in one of the news reports. So again, you have to pay attention to this when you see one of those news articles. Always click on it and actually read through the entire article, because once you get past the first couple of paragraphs, you'll probably see that it says based on one model run or based on one run of the European model, this was said. So it's usually based off of a very select thing, and they're not looking at the broad picture. They're just kind of using that one headline to try and get more clicks and views on whatever they're posting. So always be careful of that, and try and I like to look at the direct models. I really don't look at too many news sites when it comes to the weather, because most of them are not that accurate. You're looking at right around 2 to 6 inches of snowfall in that blue color, so that's going to be up for central Idaho, southern Montana, and northwestern Wyoming, maybe into the foothills of Colorado, as well as north central Wyoming as well. And then we have 6+ inches. That's probably going to be closer to Yellowstone in northwestern Wyoming, as well as for some of the higher elevations into central Idaho. If we move on to the GFS model, you can see completely different. We're looking at a concentration of potentially heavy snowfall into northwestern Wyoming. That would be, again, mostly high elevation. And then you're looking at not as much for central Idaho as well as southwestern Wyoming, as well as southwestern Montana, where we're dealing with maybe just a dusting to a couple inches. I don't think this is going to happen. If we look at the icon model, it's definitely showing a little bit more snowfall for central Idaho and southwestern Montana, as well as the bulk of the snowfall, which I think most models agree, the bulk of the snowfall probably will be in Wyoming, and that'll be in northwestern Wyoming, most likely around Yellowstone and some of the mountainous terrain around there. So looking like a fairly high elevation event, although again, even some lower lying areas in isolated locations could get some flurries out of this. I'm not expecting any real accumulation. If you look at my snowfall forecast, I'm expecting under an inch of snowfall from Saturday through Monday in all these various spots. You can see a few of the high elevations in Washington and Oregon, as well as eastern Oregon through central Idaho, much of western Montana, especially high elevations, really. So areas like Billings, Montana, not expecting snowfall for you guys. It's going to be the high elevations, maybe the mountain peaks and mountain tops around that city, but probably not in the city itself. Even if it were to snow, if you were to see snow flurries, it's going to be way too warm on the surface that most of that snow would end up reaching the ground and then eventually quickly melting. So looking at less than an inch of snowfall, mainly for high elevation regions from Saturday through Monday. I could even extend that through Tuesday morning in a few of these spots, but for the most part, it'll be all said and done with by Monday. If you look at the next one, 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, that includes some parts of eastern Oregon and north central Wyoming, north central Washington, there. And again, that's very high elevation regions. Central Idaho, southern Montana, northwestern Wyoming, as well as some parts of the foothills of Colorado, where you're dealing with 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. And again, this is what I think will actually accumulate on the ground. So some of the snowfall models may be showing up to 20 inches in some of the higher peaks. I don't think all of that will accumulate, because it should be a little bit on the warmer side. While it's snowing, it might not be down to 32 degrees or below in some of those spots. So it might take a little bit longer to get some of that snowfall to actually stick. 3 to 6 inches of snowfall into central Idaho, southern Montana, northwestern Wyoming, and a few spots in northeastern Wyoming, as well as north central Colorado, where we're dealing with 3 or more inches of snowfall. And then finally 6+ inches of snowfall. I'm not going to put a top on it because it can be very, very kind of localized, especially with the mountain events where we're dealing with high elevation snowfall. So if I were to put a number on it, I would say peak number around 12, 13, 14 inches of snow. But let's just go with a generalized 6+ inches. That goes for northwestern Wyoming as well as for central Idaho, again, mostly in the high elevation regions. Let's start talking about why this is happening. So here's the upper air map. In the blue and green, that's where we have our trough. So in through the northwest, we have a trough digging in to that area. So you have that trough originating up from western Canada, and this is going to be sliding on further to the east. And what you're actually going to see is that the rotation of this, it's starting off as a trough, which kind of has its roots into northern Alberta, and then eventually moving all the way down into Oregon. So it's kind of on a curve axis. If we look at by the time that it hits into Monday, you can see that that axis is completely gone. It's pretty much just a straight line, so that you have seen a little bit of shifting within that trough, and it's starting to now disconnect with the general low pressure environment into northern Canada. So these two areas are now starting to disconnect a little bit more. We have a little bit of high pressure into the eastern United States, so that might slow down the system. That's why in parts of the Dakotas, Montana, maybe even down into northern Nebraska, you might be dealing with rainfall for 1 or 2 days at a time, because the system is getting stalled out over your area and waiting for that high pressure to move out of the way, so that it can move out of the way as well. So you can see that by Tuesday evening, still into Montana, Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa. So we're kind of right along that area where we have the trough. By that point, ridging has now built up into this area. So that area of low pressure, which was into northern Canada, is now all the way into Greenland, and you have high pressure, which is now building up into central and northern Canada. So a much bigger temperature shift into the polar areas, and that'll have big drastic impacts on the United States. So we have that trough into the northern plains, and then eventually that'll swing on through the northeast. It'll become a tilted trough into Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and you're actually going to see some rather cold temperatures. We're going to go over those in just a moment, but you can see that we have that trough originating from, or not originating, but starting up in Ontario and then moving its way all the way down to Pennsylvania and Ohio, and that's how it's oriented by that point. So here's where you're dealing with the cooler temperatures, and that's going to continue to move on further to the northeast. I would assume this would be carried out somewhere closer to southern Greenland eventually, once that completely swings out into Canada. So we're going to see some rather chilly temperatures associated with this. If we look at the actual temperature map, here it'd be for Sunday, you can see that we have colder temperatures, mainly for the northwest, getting below 32 degrees in high elevation regions of Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, but not too widespread at the at sea level or closer to the lower lying areas. And then if we look at for Monday, you can see much more widespread. We have some of the areas of eastern Oregon, northern Nevada, as well as some of the lower lying spots in Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, now getting involved with sub 32 degree temperatures. So who knows, we might get a few freeze warnings to be issued into the interior mountain west. You can still see that we're dealing with that rainfall into the Dakotas by this point. So you have that rain in here, and to the east of there, you're actually going to have really nice warm temperatures into the 60s and 70s, and this is the low temperature. So believe it or not, Wisconsin, Minnesota, you're going to be dealing with low temperatures in the 60s and 70s as you get into Monday, and then that's going to all come crashing down as we get into Tuesday. So it's going to be a little bit more of a gradual shift. You'll start to get your low temperatures down into the 50s, maybe some upper 40s into a few of these spots, and then by Wednesday you're really going to start to feel it. This is probably going to be one of the first days where it's actually noticeably chilly outside if you live in the northern plains, as well as into the Rockies, where we have those temperatures probably around 30 degrees, 30 to 40 degrees. If you live up into the northern plains, it's probably going to be closer to 35 to 40 degrees, and if you live even further south of there, so let's say this area, we're looking at mostly 40 to 50 degrees. So it will be rather chilly into these spots, and definitely something that I'm going to keep an eye on. I'll probably have a few more updates for you guys. Sorry if this is a little bit of a longer video. We had the weather photo of the day, which I wanted to feature and kind of give all the attention needed for, and then also we just had a ton of information. We had our snowfall forecast, which yesterday we had our first ever snowfall forecast for this year, and of course this is the second one for this winter season, so already getting started, and it's only September 17th, so we probably have a long ways to go. I'm assuming that we're still going to have snowfall forecasts going all the way through April, so that would be another 7 months where we're dealing with snow in the United States, and I'll be covering that I may even cover some snow events if they go into southern Canada as well. So we'll be covering all of the winter weather that you need. And then eventually, once we get into the spring and the summer, we'll start to talk about severe weather again, hurricanes, all of that. So we have a ton of weather information on this channel. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications so you never miss another one. If you have any questions or comments, leave a comment down below and I'll be responding within a couple of hours of you posting that. And then also, if you have any weather photos that you want to send in, maybe any fall foliage that's starting to pop up in your area. I know it's a little bit early for that, but especially as we get into October, if you see any fall foliage for your area, definitely send those in. If we ever get any winter storms for your area, send in pictures of the snowfall as well, and I'll definitely feature them in this video. So again, that is going to wrap it up, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.